We see it every single season. For some players, that preseason hype train, it leaves the station and then boom, it's a runaway. Whether it's balling out against third stringers, viral one-handed grabs on Twitter, or just fading injury concerns as we get closer to week 1. There's always some players who have their draft stock inflated so much that they're going several rounds earlier than they were earlier in the summer. This can be tough, especially if you've been plugged in all offseason. You know that if you were drafting a month ago, you could have gotten all these guys for basically free. But now, as we get closer to the season, you have to spend some serious fantasy draft capital in order to acquire their services. That can be a tough pill to swallow. But here's the wrong approach: avoiding these players blindly simply because they used to go later in drafts. Believing you can't draft these guys because you're not getting the best possible value. That's simply irrational. Many of these players are being propped up because of an increase in information. We know more now about their situation, about their health, about their talent. The ADP market is reacting to actionable advice. The problem is they're not usually reacting enough. And that's where today's video comes in. What's up, everyone? I'm Matt Savoca from Stokastic.com, and today I'm bringing you 5 players skyrocketing up my draft board, but that I'm taking in my fantasy drafts anyway. Players who are still worth their draft cost at their new 2022 fantasy ADPs. Let's get into it. Number 5, Dameon Pierce. How could we not mention Dameon Pierce? Pierce has been a revelation this preseason, and now looks primed for a clear-cut role in the Houston Texans backfield. The 4th-round pick out of Florida looks like the most explosive player on a team aching for any semblance of playmaking ability, and seems poised to take over the lead role in that backfield right away. But here's the tough part. In the last 5 weeks, he's moved from the running back 40 in fantasy drafts up to the running back 29. And even though they played in the last preseason game and Dameon Pierce didn't, there's still concerns that Marlon Mack and Rex Burkhead aren't exactly going away. Then there's the fact that the Texans also have the longest odds to be the highest scoring team in the NFL. But we know young athletic players can overcome bad situations and make a fantasy impact right away, especially at the running back position. The prerequisite here is you need to get all the volume. By taking Pierce at his new 7th round ADP, that's essentially what you're betting on. That's not a dumb bet by any stretch, but Pierce will need to beat out Mack and Burkhead handily, paving the way for the running back fantasy football trifecta: a majority of the between the 20s carries, a majority of the receiving work, and a majority of the goal line work as well. A running back, even on a team projected to be the lowest scoring in the NFL, is absolutely viable as a 7th round pick if they're going to be dominant in all 3 of those phases. Think James Robinson in 2020. By taking Pierce in the 7th round, that's exactly what you're projecting. And that's well within Pierce's range of outcomes now. It's definitely a risky proposition, a ceiling bet, because you know he was a double-digit round pick just a few weeks ago. But it's not a bad bet. Just understand the decision you're making by drafting him there, get some high floor players around him, and draft Dameon Pierce for his ceiling at the 7-8 turn. Number 4, Rashaad Penny. Not only was Penny the most efficient running back in fantasy football at the end of the 2021 season, he's the first injury beneficiary of the 2022 fantasy season. 2nd round rookie running back Kenneth Walker is dealing with, if you ask the king of coach speak Pete Carroll, a hernia thing that's not exactly a hernia thing, but might be a hernia thing, but it definitely required surgery. And the timeline for Walker's return is extremely unclear. So now Penny, once again, is firmly atop the Seahawks depth chart. Some things to remember about Penny last season. He came on late. He didn't see double-digit opportunities in a game until week 13. He ultimately ended up leading the NFL in yards per touch. Over 12% of his runs went for more than 10 yards, and he hit 18 or more fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. But considering that strong finish and the injury news here, the ADP still hasn't moved all that much for Penny. He's sitting at running back 31 now, and unlike Pierce in Houston, Penny has no competition outside of Walker to speak of. The running back 31 has averaged about 8.5 half PPR fantasy points per game over the last 9 seasons. Penny should smash that expected fantasy score to begin the season, and that's even with the scramble-happy Geno Smith at the helm. Despite the perpetual injury concerns, Penny is a high-upside, risk-free bet outside the top 30 running backs, and I'm definitely still in. Number 3, yet another running back, A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon should have never been going outside the top 24 running backs in fantasy drafts, but for some reason, that's where he began the summer. Now the field has wisened up a little bit, realized the level of volume and efficiency that Dillon showed down the stretch, and realized there was a stretch of time where Dillon and Jones were sharing the field, and Dillon was the more efficient player. From week 10 on last season, A.J. Dillon saw 15 or more total opportunities in 6 of 8 games. In 50% of those games, he was targeted 4 or more times. and he averaged 9.2 yards per reception. People like to say he was a bad receiver, but he was top 20 among all running backs in receiving yards. And of course, as a rusher, he was more than solid. The advanced metrics love this guy too. 16th in yards created, 9th in player profilers, production premium, and top 5 in the NFL in expected points added. Even with Davante Adams still on the roster last year, they made A.J. Dillon a top 12 player in total red zone touches. I don't know about you, but I like touchdown upside for my running backs. Now, I have been in a few drafts where I've seen him go inside the top 20 backs. That's getting a little rich, but I've seen him hovering in that running back 20 to running back 23 range, and I think that is the perfect spot to draft A.J. Dillon this year. A player with guaranteed week 1 opportunities, and if Aaron Jones were to ever miss time, would have a workhorse role right away. Even at this new inflated ADP, just outside the top 20 running backs, I'm still drafting Dillon with confidence. He is my running back 2 of choice in anchor RB or hero RB builds this season. Number 2, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin's going to play week 1, folks. I've had this belief for some time, but on August 22nd, it was pretty much confirmed when he was cleared for 11-on-11s in practice. Barring a setback, one of the best receivers in the league on one of the best teams in the league is going to be good to go for that Sunday night game against Dallas. In practice, he's currently going full speed, blocking on run plays in full pads. He's full go. But the Bucs, a team with clear Super Bowl aspirations who have been bit by the injury bug this preseason, are taking it slow with Godwin in terms of preseason play. We don't really have any concerns whatsoever about talent or role within the offense, and we certainly don't have any concerns about the fantasy relevancy of that offense. The literal only concern is health for Godwin, and we've got nothing but glowing positive reports. In fact, the other receivers around him, like Mike Evans and Russell Gage, they've been dealing with injuries more than Godwin this preseason. And once he's on the field, you know he's going to be an impact player in fantasy football. Godwin was 11th in expected fantasy points per game last year and managed to be 7th in fantasy points per game before going down with a midseason injury. He was top 10 in total receptions and top 5 in yards after the catch. And with all these glowing positive reports, he's moved from wide receiver 30 to wide receiver 27. To me, this is an absolute steal. When we created our first run of Stokastic projections and made an injury-free projection for Godwin, he came out as our 18th overall player, and yet we're still seeing him drafted outside the top 24 receivers. Don't let it happen in your draft. This is my reach wide receiver in the mid-rounds. Even if he's not fully healthy week 1, again, I think he will be, you can stash him on your IR slot, take a flex player for 1 week, and then put in one of the best receivers in the league when he's ready to go. This is a really simple pick. Godwin is a smash at his current ADP. Hey guys, if you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy yet, you are missing out. The best place to play best ball fantasy football is on Underdog Fantasy, and we've got a special offer for you right now. If you use promo code Stokastic, STOKASTIC, you will get a first match deposit bonus up to $100, and the gifts don't stop there. Over at Stokastic, we'll kick in our best ball draft kit and our fantasy draft kit as well. Access to all our rankings, tournament rankings, cash game rankings, and of course, getting you ready for your league's draft as well. Easy as that. Just use promo code Stokastic and make a deposit as well. We got a link in the video description below if you're watching on YouTube. That's STOKASTIC. And my final player, Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is a first-round pick in fantasy drafts. I will repeat that. Alvin Kamara is a first-round pick in fantasy drafts. With all indications being that Kamara will not be suspended this season, moving from RB15 in ADP to RB10 is not nearly enough of a move up the draft boards for Kamara this offseason. Assuming he's playing a full season, there is just no way you can nitpick this profile into saying he's anything but a first-rounder. In 2021, his expected fantasy points per game was the 5th highest we've seen from any flex player in the last 2 seasons. He was 4th among running backs in fantasy points per game despite dealing with a bevy of backups at the quarterback position. He led the NFL in route participation rate, and while his broken tackle numbers weren't as impressive as we've seen in the past as a pure rusher, he was his same old elusive self as a receiver, ranking top 5 in the NFL in yards per route run. Currently, I have Kamara right below Dalvin Cook in my running back rankings, above Joe Mixon and above Najee Harris. The Saints should find themselves in a lot of games with shootout potential, and Kamara has no volume concerns whatsoever. In fact, the additions of Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave and the return of Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas, that only increases the chances that Kamara's opportunity turns into higher quality opportunity. Kamara was 5th in the NFL in red zone touches last year. With everybody back and healthy in New Orleans, he could absolutely compete for number 1 in that metric. If you've got a late first round pick this year, draft Kamara with confidence. And that's it, guys. 5 players who are skyrocketing up my draft boards, but I'm still not afraid to draft anyway. Make sure to check the links below. We've got must draft players, must avoid players as well, and subscribe to the channel because we are helping you out all draft season and all fantasy season long. And check out that offer from Stokastic and drafters as well. Until next time, I'm Matt Savoca. We'll see you guys later.